All right. Welcome. Thank you guys for joining us in this very special Facebook Live. I'm very, very excited for our guest today. Have a lot of questions for her, but before I introduce her, I want to tell you guys a little bit about who I am. My name is Efrain Reyes, and I am the Latino Dad Coach. So I decided to start my life coaching company because I wanted to help people in a deep, meaningful way. Sorry, the airplane's right above me. Sorry about that, guys. But um, I wanted to help people in a deep, meaningful way, and especially for people that are going through those key life transitions and help them transition in a healthy and positive way. And one thing that I noticed that there was a lack of support for Latino fathers as they became fathers and in their marriage. There was not a lot of support. Especially, I noticed this when I became a father, and I wanted to, be the best father that I can be for my daughter. So I started to look for different resources, and there's a lot of things for mothers, but not so much for fathers. So I started my own life coaching company to help with this, and you guys can find me on Instagram at Change Coaching. And very excited for my interview today with Leslie. She is has a wealth of knowledge. We're going to be talking about a topic very that comes a lot, which is the chancla, right? Disciplining your kids. And Leslie has worked with hundreds and hundreds of children, parents, and couples in this topic. She was a behavioral coach, preschool teacher, but I want her to introduce herself. She's also the owner and founder of Latinx Parenting. And if you guys are not following her on Instagram, you guys definitely need to follow her. And without further ado, here's Leslie.
Hi,
How are you,
Efrain.
Leslie?
I'm doing really good. I just finished my Chipotle, so I'm
Oh,
feeling like
no,
pancita llena, corazón contento.
yes, yes. And thank you for
Yeah.
joining me. I really appreciate you taking off your time. I know you're like in between meetings and you're like eating. So, muchas gracias. Te lo agradezco muchísimo.
Yes.
So, first of all, I
Yeah.
just want to give you some time to tell some of the people that are watching your journey through just founding your own organization, Latinx Parenting, some of the work that you're doing, and how this organization came about.
Yeah. I used to be a preschool teacher for many years, and I always thought that I would work with children. I always thought that that was my purpose in life. And I actually was a psychology major very early on in college, and then I took a child development course, and it made me start to reflect on my own childhood. And I thought if I work with children, I'm going to make a huge difference in their lives, and have that connection with them. And then once I started working with children, I started realizing the impact of parents on their children's lives. Obviously, we all know that parents are a huge influence, but I really started to see it when children would go back home during like a winter break or a spring break. And a lot of the work that I had been doing in connecting with them to help some of their more challenging behaviors, when they would come back from these breaks, all of a sudden, all of the behaviors were back.
Mhm.
And so I really started to think about, again, just the power that parents had on their children's lives. And that started to really shift my focus a little bit. I didn't know it at the time, but it started to shift my focus to parent education. And I got pregnant around that same time when I was a preschool teacher. And it totally took me by surprise. I wasn't planning on getting pregnant. I wasn't ready. I didn't think I was ready. But I was in a position where I really did want this child. And so my partner and I, we moved in together, and a lot of things started coming up around how I wanted to be as a mother, how I wanted to parent or not parent. And I ended up going back to therapy at that time. I've been in therapy on and off since I was 9 years old. And doing that work with my therapist made me realize that I didn't really have a blueprint for the kind of parents I wanted to be. And so
Mhm.
I started learning a lot of things by reading, and by really, again, reflecting a lot more on my own childhood, on my relationship with my mother, which at that point was non existent, on my relationship with my dad. And my focus started shifting a lot more. at that point towards working with parents. And so when I graduated college, I was a mother. My daughter was 3 when I started working again. I started working at the Child Abuse Prevention Center here in Orange County and working with parents. And I was teaching like 7 classes a week, but I was teaching a curriculum that didn't really speak to the populations, the Latinx populations
Yeah.
that I was working with. And I had also been certified in another curriculum called Trauma Informed Nonviolent Parenting by a woman named Ruth Beaglehole. And so I started applying some of that curriculum in. But again, there was so much that didn't speak to the specific lived experience of Latinx people, of Latino people. And so I started learning a little bit more about Latino psychology, Chicano Chicanx psychology. And I started receiving a lot of information about parenting from a lot of parenting books that were mainly white written, like people who were,
Yeah.
Caucasian were writing these books. They were really good books, but again, didn't speak to that experience. And I did not see myself reflected in that experience. And so a couple of years ago, I finally said, that's it. I want to work with Latino people. I want to work with Latinx people. And I started Latinx parenting with a co-founder at the time, my friend Lisette. And we just said, you know what, we're going to own this. We're going to say, like, we're going to work with Latinx people. That's going to
Yeah.
be our focus. And everything that we do from there on out is going to be to really support parents in raising brown children
Mm-hmm.
to thrive. And so that's kind of in a nutshell what led me to create Latinx parenting. And I'm still learning, right? Like I
Yeah.
learn from the parents that I'm working with every day that I host a class or a workshop. I'm also on that journey of learning. And so it's just been really beautiful, and parents have really resonated, I think, with um, wanting to be better for our children, and realizing that there were things that we experienced as children that were not the best for us. And so I'm just honored to be able to hold that space for those conversations.
No, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that your story. And I can really relate to that because same thing happened when I became a father. Like I mentioned, learning what does a father, a good father look like, right? And especially if you don't have this in your family, or you don't have this, your father being a good role model, then you might tend to, fall into those patterns. And that's something that I did not want to do. But also I didn't have the skills and knowledge to just be a good father. And I think, parenting is so complex. And when you say that everything, that's like, that's not a good sign. You are always learning, you're always growing. And I appreciate the work that you do. I think it's so needed in our community. I see your success, and that's a reflection that is needed. And I want to talk about this movement that you have. You have a lot of posts with the en chancla culture, right? And we all know this, like, when we were younger, mom used to use the chancla to, discipline their kids, even, sometimes threw it, and they had good aim with the chancla, right? I don't know. These moms had like really good like pitching skills. They should have been doing something else. But it sounds funny, but there's also a lot of violence within that. So tell me a little bit about like this en chancla culture.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, la chancla is really like this emblem, and we always imagine the abuelita or the mother like throwing a chancla voladora, and many times people have made videos of it, and we laugh because we relate. And we laugh because it reminds us, right? It reminds us of
Yeah.
growing up as a Latinx child. And so the more that I learned about corporal punishment in Latinx homes, the more I realized that it really did not come from those of us that have indigenous roots in Latino America. And so that's just kind of the cultural, the historical piece that I'll talk about more in a little bit. But what I define as chancla culture is really anything that causes a breaking of the mind, body, or spirit of a child. And so that could be shaming, that could be el cinto, el gancho, that could be manipulation. And so it's not just the chancla. Chancla culture is really anything that dominates and that oppresses a child that is growing up, with regular, like normal child behaviors, pushing buttons and really testing boundaries. But when parents haven't done a lot of that inner work, we start resorting to things like la chancla, and things that are going to keep our children in line. There's no shame, right? There's no shame in having used La Chancla. There's no shame in our parents having used La Chancla. It's just a matter of understanding that there are alternatives that are not going to be destructive to the connection between parent and child, and are not going to hinder the brain development of a child, right? And so all of us kind of have that same goal, that we want to raise our children to be, people who thrive, and people who are successful. And so I don't think that we realize that sometimes by utilizing some of those alternative methods, corporal punishment, or some of the harsher methods that we grew up with, that we're actually causing the opposite effect
Yeah,
in our children.
no, definitely. No, and I totally agree with you. There's so many points that you just made that just, I'm reflecting on. Um, but I feel like, parents often don't have the skills or knowledge to, handle this situation. So what I wanted to do is kind of just really break down like what this situation looks like and what's going on in the parents' mind and what are they thinking. And then we'll go to the child. So let's just say, before when a parent decides to use a chancla, they often have used other, methods, right? Maybe this is the last resort.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is, some of the thoughts and some of the feelings that parents are having when they say, you know what, this is my last resort and I'm going to use the chancla or
Yeah.
the cinto, like whatever whatever form of corporal punishment that they
Yeah,
use.
no, I appreciate that question, because it's really helpful for parents, I think, to break down exactly what is happening. And so oftentimes our nervous systems, like our bodies, become activated when we feel that there is a threat, right? And so sometimes our children telling us no, or our children misbehaving or not obeying what we're asking them to do, can very much feel like our nervous systems, our bodies are being threatened. And so as that happens, the part of our brain that can really think critically and think, okay, if I use La Chancla, if I spank, si le doy nalgadas, like that's going to create disconnection. And so we get into this like power struggle and this dynamic between parent and child that is very much win-lose, right? And so like if you don't act in the right way, si no te portas bien, what does that mean about me as a parent? And so there's pressure that's happening. There's the nervous system activation. There's the fact that we really do want our child to obey in that moment, and so we can become very, very overwhelmed and go into a state of fight or flight, or freeze. Sometimes, parents will shut down. But when it comes to utilizing la chancla, that's very much like a feeling of fight, right? If you don't listen to me, if you don't obey, entonces te voy a pegar, te voy a dar con la chancla.
Yeah.
And so pretty frequently, like they're not in a state, we're not in a state of um, being able to really think clearly when we're that angry, when we're that activated. And so for children, that can be really scary. That can be really scary. And so parents think that we're teaching them to respect us, but what's happening is that we're teaching them to fear us. And so yes,
Mhm.
they're going to start behaving, but what is that doing to our long-term connection between parent and child if we continue to allow ourselves to resort to some of those strategies, right? And
Yeah.
so there's no shame. It happens to all of us. It happens to all of us. And I tell parents, like, I have felt like el fuego en mi mano, like I want to spank. um I want to hit my kids, because we are human beings and we will all get to that point of activation at one point or another. But it's, what do you do when you feel those feelings? What do you do when you sense that you are getting to a place where you might want to hit your child? Knowing all of this information about how it may cause disconnection and the harm it may cause to the brain development if it continues, then what do we do? And that's really the question. And so my invitation to parents has always been, well, we do our inner work. We really think about what are the things that are triggering to us that our children present us with, because our children are here to teach us how to parent. Like, there's no book that will teach us how to parent our particular child. Our children are the ones that teach us how to parent them, right? And so we really want to preserve their needs. We want to preserve their feelings. We want to preserve our connection to them. And that can be very hard to do if we haven't had the models for how to do that.
No, definitely. I think like you said, every parent has felt. What did you say? El fuego en la mano. I haven't heard that.
Yeah,
Is that
you
what it
feel
was?
it. You feel like the fire
Yeah,
in your hand, like,
the
oh my
fire in
gosh,
your
like
hand.
my child, like I'll tell my daughter, like, okay, go, go put away your shoes, go put away your shoes. And like by the fifth time, it's just like, go put away your shoes.
Yeah, no, for
So my
sure.
chancla is like the verbal chancla. It's not so
Yeah.
much the physical chancla.
Yeah, and no, and that's often too very detrimental to the kid. It can be physical, but it can also be verbal. Um, but when you feel that el fuego en la mano, you said what are some things that parents can do in that moment to like maybe reflect, or I feel like it also has to do a lot with the lack of control that they have, right? They feel that they're not in control. They
Hmm.
feel that they're not in control of the situation, and this can maybe kind of tie back to when they were a child and they were not in control of a situation similar to this. And like what did they do is or what did the parents do
Hmm.
is use the chancla, use the cinto. So can you tell us some like strategies when you are in this situation, like what can parents do or say, or what do you think?
Yeah, so it's a feeling of like helplessness and like powerlessness. You're right, like we're very much feeling like I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to parent right now. And so I'm going to utilize these strategies because they work, right? They work. They're going
Hmm.
to create the behavior that I want to create. And so many times it's about what's going to help us stay regulated, what's going to help us stay in the mentality in which we can approach our children. And so sometimes in the talleres, I say, what is step one? And people will say, okay, well, you go to your child and you talk to them. And it's like, no, step one is going to start with you. What are you going to do in order to even be able to be in the right frame of mind to go to your child and to talk to them? For some parents, that looks like taking space. For some parents, that means like deep breathing. For some parents, that means going outside. It's so dependent on whatever is going to help that parent
Hmm.
stay regulated. For some parents, it's texting a friend, oh my gosh, I want to throw my child out the window right now.
Yeah.
We're not throwing our child out the window. We're saying this is what I feel like doing. And so
Yeah.
Daniel Siegel, who is a neuroscientist, he talks about like name it to tame it, right? And so really being very clear about what we are feeling. When I
Hmm.
am starting to feel activated in my nervous system, I will tell my daughter, like, I'm starting to feel hot and tight in my belly and in my chest. And she knows, like
She's like,
I'm
uh-oh,
starting.
mom.
It's not even it's not, I'm not even saying like I'm starting to get mad at you, because that's not always like a universal thing, right? And so we talk about labeling feelings, which is
Mm,
really helpful, but I also want parents to label the sensation that you're experiencing, because
mm,
that
mhm,
is relatable to a child. If I say my belly is starting to feel tight, my child will receive, oh, that means, that's not a very comfortable feeling.
yeah.
And it's not to manipulate her into doing something or not doing something. It's to let her know, like, hey, I'm starting to feel dysregulated and I need to do what I need to do in order to feel regulated again. And so many times I will go take space. My strategy really is like texting my friend and being like, like
Yeah.
I, I have to reach out to my support without feeling like I'm going to be a burden on anybody. And so sometimes we feel like we can't reach out to people because they're going to judge our parenting or they're going to
Hmm.
judge our child. And so releasing a lot of that shame outside of those situations, right? And being really proactive so that we can have these conversations and say, okay, next time this happens, what am I going to do when I'm starting to feel that fire, that fire in my hand, or that tightness in my belly and my chest? And so a lot of it is very preventative, but when we are in those moments, that's when we utilize those strategies.
Yeah,
You know,
no, thank
so
you. Thank you for sharing that.
it's
So you said a
hard.
lot of good points there. One of them was being like recognizing your feelings, right? Recognizing how you feel, not blocking those feelings, because those are real feelings, and those are really important, and they help you guide yourself through that situation. Another thing that you said is reaching out to your support system. Make sure that if you have a couple of friends, parents maybe that might be in similar situation, and you're able to text them, reach out to them, right? And then the other thing that you mentioned as well, what was it? There was one more thing that was really, really good. So reaching out, and then recognizing your feelings. Oh, naming or the sensation that you have in your body to your children, and just to people in general. I think that's a really, I don't do that, but I think that's a really helpful way to create empathy, right? Because if you telling someone that, you're mad, like, okay, you're mad, but if you're telling someone, I feel this tight pain in my chest, you're like, oh wow, that must feel uncomfortable. So you're able to create more of an empathy um, sensation with your children and just with people in general. So I
Yeah.
think those are really good. And then you also mentioned that, you know, a lot of these things has to be preventative, right? We can't wait to to be in that situation, because from there it's a little bit too late by that time, right? So what are some of the preventative work that parents can start doing at home, that they're any parent that's watching this?
Yeah, yeah. I think what has been really powerful to me is to have safe spaces in which to process my parenting, right? And to have these kinds of conversations where we can acknowledge how hard it gets and to have that support system, that community around me. Something else that's been really helpful, and I encourage everybody, whether they're having issues or not or challenges, is to have a therapist, have a safe person that you can process not only the challenges of parenting, but the challenges of just like having been a child that was parented in really harsh ways sometimes, because we all have our wounds. And when we are acting in these ways with our children, we are showing our wounds. And so, being very vulnerable, like it's okay to be vulnerable, and the work that you're doing for Latino fathers, like that's hard work, right? In trying to get people to understand that vulnerability is not weakness. And so for me as a mother, like it's really important for me to have those spaces in which I can be vulnerable. Another thing that's been really powerful for me is to begin reparenting myself, and not expecting other people, even my parents who are still alive, that they're going to give me all of the love and nourishment and care that maybe I didn't really receive from them when I was little. And so now I can really reclaim that and start to repair the inner child that still very much
Hmm.
exists within me. And so one of the tools that I give parents is hang up a picture of yourself when you were a child, somewhere in your house where you can see it, so that you can remember what it felt like to be a child and be scared. You can remember what it felt like to be enjoying life. You can remember what it feels like to have that curiosity and embrace that inner child and the messages that our inner child communicates to us when we are activated. Our inner child is saying like, I don't feel safe right now. And so our inner parent can come in and say, okay, well, let's take some space.
Yeah,
Let's do our breathing. Let's go text our friend. These are
yeah,
healthy strategies. And so that's been really impactful for me, is to really tune in to the child that still very much exists within me, and to be able to really nurture that little child. And so when people say
yeah,
like, well, I'm not a parent, and I'm like, well, you are a parent. You're still parenting yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that idea of reparenting yourself, because it's so true. Sometimes you did lack whatever care or love or whatever, and because of that, you're not able to transition into whatever role that you no you're becoming, right? If it's a father, if it's in your marriage or whatever it is. So doing that inner work, and like, and I love also the idea of hanging a picture of yourself when you were little. I think that's really powerful. When I thought about that, I'm like, wow, like if I see a picture of myself, that would be really powerful for me. And so I'm gonna have to go ahead and find the couple pictures that I have of my when I was young, and just really remember that childhood, and be okay with it. So I want to talk a little bit about, we're talking about the parents. I want to go into talk about a lot about some of what the child is experiencing in this situation. um, I know it can be different, you have different age kids, right? But in general, like, what do you think that the child is feeling and experiencing in this, situation when, the parent kind of loses it and ends up, using the chancla or whatever they
Yeah.
use?
Yeah, there's a lot of fear that happens. There's a lot of trepidation. Like I see the look in my child's eyes when I give like verbal chancletazos. you um, and it's disconnection, and so our children will adapt to that disconnection because they are adaptable. But what ends up happening is they don't believe that their parents, unless we've given them permission to believe that their parents are infallible. And so what children will do is they will start to blame themselves for some of these actions of the parents. And that's really unfortunate because that's when you get people that have grown up and say, well, I was hit, but I deserved it. And my argument is no, nobody as a child deserves to be hit. Nobody as a child deserves to be shamed, to be blamed, to be manipulated. You are a child, and so children are just trying to get their needs met. And so when I work with parents, I work also from a framework of nonviolence, which says that every behavior has at the root of it a basic human need, right? And so children are either meeting their need for play, for connection, for curiosity, and the strategies that they're using are the behaviors that sometimes feel very activating to us. And so when we are not able to meet those needs, or when we're not able to at least name what those needs are with children, that's when children start to feel unheard, invalidated, and sometimes the behaviors will get worse, just because they want so badly to be seen, they want so badly to be heard, or they will shut down and they will just accept. They'll
Yeah,
just that's where you get like the really good girl, the really good boy that are just like, no, I'm not going to give you any trouble. And parents will say, oh, my child is really good, very obedient. But what ends up
yeah,
happening is that child grows up. I was that child. I ended up growing up and being like, F this, like I'm not gonna I'm not gonna stay good anymore. Like
yeah,
I'm gonna go off and try to meet these needs a different way. And
yeah,
so it's really important that we're very intentional about the ways that we're parenting and not shaming ourselves when we mess up, but still, really trying to reset intentions as often as possible and repair when those disconnections happen with our children, because that repair, our children are so wonderful. They give us grace, they give us forgiveness immediately. Like I feel so bad sometimes if I yell at my daughter and immediately she'll be like, it's, you yelled, mommy, but it's okay. And I'm just like, no, it's not okay.
we beat ourselves up.
Yes, we really do. And so, I have to just engage with her in that repair process so that she can know, like, okay, my mom is human, and I'm human, and this is how, we reconnect. And so sometimes I'll
Yeah,
go to her and I'll say, I want, are you ready to reconnect? Can we reconnect? Sometimes she's ready and sometimes she's not.
no, definitely. And I love that you said, repair, that, that's a big key word, I think, because we are going to mess up. We're human and we're going to do things that we're going to regret. But sometimes I feel like uh, parents think that, we are always have to be right in the child's eyes. And I think it's even better when you tell your child, you know what, I'm human too. And, I messed up. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I hurt you and I'm sorry. Let's,
Yeah.
reconnect, let's repair. And I think that's where the strength and the value comes with the child, right? Because like you said, we're gonna mess something up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we can have the expectation that we're not going to mess up. I think that
Yeah,
that's where like shame and blame of ourselves comes from. If we have the expectation that we're going to do things perfectly all the time and I'm always going to be in alignment with my intentions, like that's also not realistic. And so we have to know that yes, we are going to mess up, and there are steps that we can take to repair that connection, that we have to take to repair that connection if
yeah,
we want to have good, healthy, long-term relationships with our children.
yeah. No, and I wanted to ask you another question in terms of the children. I feel like oftentimes because we want to control the child and want them to be a certain way, and the child feels that lack of control of just being able to make their own decisions and stuff like that. So this is just my theory, but maybe you can elaborate on this. They go into maybe school or other groups seeking that control, right? And that's when that bullying starts. That's when these kids start messing with the other kids and bullying the other kids because they want to feel in control of something, right? Because they don't have this at home, so now they're looking for it somewhere else. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Either we're raising bullies or we're raising victims sometimes,
Mhm.
and kids that are just used to it. Like, I'm just used to being bullied, so I'm just gonna allow this to happen, right? And so,
Yeah,
um, or you're right that there are those power dynamics that start to transfer into other environments, and so we have to be really mindful of that. One of the things that I think is really helpful and really hard for parents is to let our children say no to us sometimes, because sometimes that can be what activates us when we're asking them
mm,
to do something and our child will say no. That no is them speaking up to a bully sometimes. Like, we are
yeah,
sometimes their first bully, like you were saying.
mm,
And so when we are allowing them to set boundaries with us, like, we are really raising them to use their voice. And so it's interesting because when I have my classes and I'll hear parents say, like, I really want my child to be outspoken and I really want my child to be very independent, but the ways in which we raise our children don't teach them some of those values.
right,
How can we teach our child to be outspoken and to stand up for themselves when we don't allow it in our household? They're not just going to all of a sudden learn it out
yeah,
of nowhere.
right.
And so we really have to see ourselves as that first social environment for them where they're going to practice some of these qualities.
Definitely. No, yeah, I totally agree with you. And I want to move on to a little bit of like the father role, because that's really like what I love talking about and I love learning about. And back in the day, father used to work maybe in el rancho. They used to you do the fields, and mom used to stay home and cook and do all the thing, right? And maybe it still happens now, but it's more like both parents now kind of have to work. But one thing that I did, like I would hear a lot, like, espérate que llegue tu papá, porque cuando llegue tu papá, sí vas a ver cómo te va a ir.
Yeah.
Entonces, like, so they're creating this fear of what dad is, right? And then dad comes home, and as he comes home, he's like excited to hear his children, but the first thing that mom says is like, mira lo que hizo, blah, blah, blah. Y la tienes que regañar y la tienes que castigar. And so that is kind of like in between this hard spot, right? Where, okay, I wasn't here, but I want to support my wife. Um, so oftentimes what happens in they end up being the authoritarian, or maybe because they're a little bit bigger or their voice is a little bit more deep or whatever it is, but then that creates that disconnection between the child and the father. So I want to see if you can just elaborate on that and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we have this expectation for men to be the tough ones, and actually, like, moms can be really tough too, but I feel like when we and I was fortunate because in the relationship between my mom and dad, my mom was the tough one, and so it was like, espera hasta que venga tu mamá.
Oh, it was the opposite.
It was the opposite. My dad hit me like one time, I remember, and I remember exactly why. My mom hit me so many times, I don't remember any of the reasons why I was hit. But when we build it could work either way, but usually, especially in Latinx culture, it is the father that is like the one that's supposed to be the tough one, right? And so I think that's such a disservice to men, because men can also be very gentle and men can also be very vulnerable. And again, it's the work that you're doing, and kind of like reclaiming what machismo is,
Yeah,
and not really giving any power to this idea that in order to raise children right, we have to be this like tough presence on their lives. And so I think that we do have to kind of shift that. And I think that the work that you're doing is really powerful for that, because I don't, it sucks to have that fear of any of your parents, but when you're having a fear of your father, like, that does something to you as
Yeah.
well, you know, and your concept, whether you're a female or a male, your concept of manhood, your concept of what it means to, you know, for me, like that kind of illustrated like my concept of what it means to be a father. Luckily, again, like I had a dad who was pretty gentle.
Hmm.
Um, and so I had this idea of like my partner is gonna have to be gentle like my dad was, but sometimes if we have that really strict father, that caused some of that pain for us, then we have this kind of twisted concept of what fathers should be.
No, yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think, you saying like fathers can be gentle, fathers can be vulnerable. That's, I think, one of the biggest skills you can teach your children, and be able to bond with your children as a father and just care for them. Yeah, of course, there's going to be discipline, right? There's going to be some type of boundaries. But the main thing, the core of it, is love and respect, and allowing them to express themselves, not um, making them go away where you wanted them to go, just allowing them to be who they are. And sometimes that can be difficult in the Latino culture, you know. So I really love the way that, all the work that you're doing, everything that you're doing is amazing. And just to end, our conversation, what are some alternative discipline strategies that parents can use in, when their children are misbehaving?
Yeah. So normally when children misbehave, like it's really helpful to know why children are misbehaving, right? And so the first thing that we want to do is really connect with whatever experience is happening for the child. This is after we've already kind of done our work to self-regulate, to really like make sure that we're in a position to be able to even approach our child in that moment. And so we have to first do the inner work, right? Check in, put on your oxygen mask. It's like the super cliche example,
Hmm.
but you put on your oxygen mask first. Um, and then we have to try to understand like what the need is underneath whatever this child's behavior is, whether it's like saying no to us, whether it's, you know, siendo desobediente or whatever it is, like there's always going to be a need. But the way that we get some level of cooperation is to connect with their experience. And so there's this idea, I don't remember exactly who it comes from. I think it's Daniel Siegel too, but it's connect before correct, you know, and I've always really held on to that because it's like us, like if somebody is going to approach us, like come into our room and say like, hey, you need to do this and this and this and this, our first instinct is going to be to resist that. You know, we have this really strong need for autonomy. And I used to share with parents, if I already picked out the clothes that I wanted to wear and my partner came in and said, you have to wear this today, I would say, no, I don't have to wear this today. I'm going to wear something else. You know? And so
Yeah.
thinking about those needs as like, okay, my child needs autonomy. My child needs the ability to have choice around their world. Children have such little choice
Yeah.
within their lives. Like they don't get to choose the school they go to. They don't get to choose the food that they eat. They don't get to choose. There's not a lot of choice that they have. And so sometimes those power struggles come from they're wanting to have some level of choice. They're wanting to have some level of autonomy. And so if we allow for some of that autonomy to unfold, we're going to see that a lot of those power struggles go away just by giving them choice, you
Yeah,
know?
no, definitely. And I see this with my daughter, obviously they have to do certain things, and we have to, they have to shower, they have to brush their teeth, they have to, do all these things. One thing that I do is like, okay, let's go shower, pick a toy. You can pick this one or this one. Which one do you want? So, you're still like, guiding them towards what you want them to do, but they still have a little bit of choice, which is like, okay, we're going to take a toy. Which one do you want?
Yeah.
This one or this one? Or, let's brush your teeth. Do you want to, I don't know, do it sitting down or standing up?
Yeah.
Like just like little things, and being creative and like allowing them to make those choices. That sometimes as parents you're like, no, you got to brush your teeth, you got to go take a shower, you got to do this. Yes, they got to do that, but giving them a little bit of choice, I think, is very important.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a need underneath. You know, I always like we'll try to look at what is underneath the behavior. And I share with parents, I'm like, it's like if you are like traveling in an airplane and you're going above a forest, and when you look down, all you see is green, and that is not the forest. That is just the very, very tip. That's the very top, right? And so you have like this idea too of the iceberg, like there's always going to be deeper roots. And so our job as parents is going to be to try to understand what those roots are for their children, but also for our own parental behaviors, right? Like, why am I reacting this way? Why am I behaving in this way where I said I would never act like my mom, I would never act like my dad, you know? But there's always going to be something underneath. And so if we start to look at people as just, you know, we are not our behaviors, we are the needs, we are the feelings, we are everything underneath that blanket
Yeah.
of green, right? There's so much complexity to humans, and so children are the same way. We have to try to understand where they're coming from, validate their experience, and still try to guide them in a way that's nonviolent, totally chancla-less.
No chanclas. I know I put on my post, it's like, summer's over, time to put your chanclas away.
You can wear them, but you know, don't
Yeah,
try to
don't use it.
Yes, absolutely, because it's gonna be worse in the long run, you know. And I always try
Yeah,
to remind parents, like, we are parenting in the present moment with awareness of our past, but we are parenting for a vision of the future that we want to create.
yes,
And
yes.
so that,
Thank you, thank you. And yeah, oh my gosh, this talk, I love it. I learned so much. Thank you so much for your time. And I want to give you some time to you know, share with people where they can find you, where they can see your work, where they can connect with you. So yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so most of the work you'll see is on Instagram, between Instagram and Facebook. And so it's at Latinx Parenting. And Facebook, also, if you search Latinx Parenting, you'll find us. There's a group associated with it also called Latinx Parents Practicing Nonviolence. It's just for Latinx parents, just people who identify as Latinx or Chicanx. And then I'm having a workshop coming up, if anybody's interested, called Intro to Decolonized Nonviolent Parenting. And so that's really going to give a lot of some of the strategies that we use in the 6-week series, which is, I'm in the middle of the 6-week series right now, but I teach the parenting class, the DNVP, Decolonized Nonviolent Parenting, and then I also have a reparenting course that's 8 weeks long versus the 6 weeks. And so there's always some kind of workshop happening. I shared with you, Efrain, the workshops that are available for download now on Teachable.
Yes,
And so, but if you
yes.
want a link to that, you can reach out on Instagram or send us an email via the website, which is
Yeah,
latinxparenting.org.
I actually downloaded one, which was the Curándome, Criándome, or something like that.
Yeah.
I haven't done it, but I'm looking forward to it. And I'm gonna do it with my wife. I think it's gonna be really,
Oh, beautiful.
yeah, it's gonna be really good for us.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And these workshops are available in Spanish too.
Todos tienen interpretación. Yes, they
Okay,
all have
español.
interpretation. The Criándome, Cuidándome one does not, but
Mhm.
everyone since that has had Spanish interpretation. And the recordings will always have the Spanish audio along with them. So if you
Okay.
go like to the Teachable and you see the Ending Chancla Culture workshop, that
Mhm.
one has the audio in Spanish too. So you can watch it with your parents and listen to the Spanish.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we have to do this again sometime. I really enjoyed talking
Yes,
to you.
and you're local, so we'll have to have a
Yeah.
social distancing like cafecito sometime.
Oh my God, I would love that. I would love that. Well, thank
No,
you so much again for your time, and I appreciate you. And we'll talk soon.
sounds good. Thank you, Efren.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye. Wow. So that was Leslie. Thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate everybody that was watching. And if you guys want to find a little bit about me, you guys can find my page on Instagram at change_coaching. And also my Facebook group is Supporting Latino Fathers. I appreciate you guys. Share this video with anyone that you think will be helpful. And I'll see you on the next Facebook Live. Have a good one.